And in this video, we take a look at a new topic which we haven't covered on this channel before. The potential guilt of Michael Steele and Jack Wombs.
Hello. Hello, please. Yeah, what's the problem, sir? We just drove down our farm track. Yeah. Go and feed our pheasants. We've come across a Range Rover with 3 people in it. Yeah. It appears that they're dead. I don't know what's happening. Blood in the motor all over them.
And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case, or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. Now before I start this new video series, which actually I'm incredibly excited to be making, I want to offer you some background information as to why this video series is being created. Now, as many of you know, this channel primarily focuses on the Essex Boys case and the potential innocence of Michael Steele and Jack Wombs. But moving forward with the content to come, and this series in particular, I want to try and offer a much more balanced viewpoint. We're going to take a look at the potential innocence of these individuals, but also the potential guilt. In this video series, I'll be sharing my own personal thoughts and theories on how this crime was committed and how that differs greatly from the story which is told by Darren Nichols. So where do we start in terms of the potential guilt of Michael Steele and Jack Wombs? Firstly, we're going to be starting with a few paragraphs from the police statement given by Donna Jaggers. Now, Donna Jaggers was the long-term girlfriend of Craig Rolfe, the driver of the Range Rover on the evening of December the 6th. The following are paragraphs from the police statement given by Donna Jaggers on the 14th of the 3rd, 1996. I understood that Steele had been asked by a London-based drugs firm to import 30 kilos of Charlie, and I believed that he was going to bring it in by plane from Holland. He had told Pat Tate that he was going to be given £50,000 as an upfront payment to take to Holland, and he was going to bring the Charlie back in company with a member of the London firm. The idea was that Pat Tate and Tony Tucker would rob the firm of the Charlie when it arrived over here. Steele had stated that he wanted to share it between them and had told the firm that he was going to land near to Clacton. Craig told me that Steele was planning to actually land in South Essex, but I never knew exactly where this was likely to be. Craig, Tony and Pat had previously obtained a machine gun from a man called Mad Mick Bowman, and the details of this are subject of a previous statement. Tate and Tucker were going to use the gun on the man from the firm in order to take the Charlie. I knew that they had made sure that the gun worked, but I did not know how far they were planning to go when they robbed the firm. Steele was going to land the plane, and Tate and Tucker were then going to take the complete load. It was going to be split evenly, 10 kilos each, and was going to be taken to John McCarthy. Craig told me that McCarthy was going to pay them nearly £1 million for the load, which was for Tate or Tucker to divide. Not long after Craig had told me about this, he told me that Tate and Tucker had decided that he was going to drive the load away once it had been taken and go to McCarthy's with it. They had told Craig that they intended to rip Steele off by cutting 3 kilos of the cocaine into 10 kilos of impure. This would have resulted in Tate and Tucker having 27 kilos between them. The remaining 3 kilos was going to be taken to Mick Bowman, and he was going to cut it for them. I do not know what the arrangements were to get the 3 kilos to Bowman or to get the 10 kilos of impure back to Steele. By this time I was getting very worried by Craig's involvement and told him that I didn't want him to have any part in it. He told me that Steele didn't know he was going to be driving, and he convinced me that he wasn't as heavily involved as the other two in what was going to happen. He also talked about the money which was likely to be coming their way and how that would enable us to go ahead with whatever plans we wanted. I realised I wasn't going to be able to talk him out of it, and, albeit I really didn't want him to go through with it, but I gave up in the end. I believed that by this time he was in too deep. Craig told me that the money had been paid to Mickey Steele, who had taken it to Holland. The weather had changed and there was now snow on the ground. Craig told me that this was causing them delay and they were waiting for it to clear. On the day of the murder, I was working as normal and was due to finish at 3 p.m. That evening, Tony Tucker and his girlfriend Anna, Craig and I and Pat Tate and a girlfriend named Claire were all going to the Global Net Cafe restaurant in Romford. We were going out because they believed they were coming into money and they were going to have a pre-celebration. Okay, now this is where the story begins. What's important is to remember this part of the statement. Craig told me that the money had been paid to Mickey Steele, who had taken it to Holland. The weather had changed and there was now snow on the ground. Craig told me this was causing them delay and they were waiting for it to clear. Now, after reading that paragraph in Donna Jagger's statement just recently, it set off a theory in my own head. Clearly, that paragraph states there that they believed that Michael Steele had taken the money across to Holland and was waiting for the weather to clear. So what if Tucker, Tate and Rolfe genuinely believed on the 6th of December 1995 that Michael Steele was in fact abroad? Does that tie in with the fact that there's no DNA evidence in the Range Rover linking Michael Steele to ever being in that vehicle? The one thing that we need to do at this point before we continue is to try our very best to wipe clear what was being told by Darren Nichols, because I think it's been drummed into us in such a heavy way over the years that Michael Steele was in a Range Rover, they met at the Halfway House pub, they travelled down the A127 towards Workhouse Lane, Nichols dropped Jack Womes off. We need to remember that this is the word of Darren Nichols, someone who has to distance himself, absolutely distance himself from any prior knowledge of these murders taking place. So let's continue on at this point with a clear mind, a clean slate, if you will. Let's forget about Michael Steele travelling down in the Range Rover, meeting at the Halfway House, putting on his overalls, taking off his boots. Let's forget about all of that and look at it from a different perspective. Let's try and look at this from a different angle here. The 2 p.m. phone call. The 2 p.m. phone call on the afternoon of December the 6th, 1995, which was supposedly to arrange the meeting for later that evening. This was the beginnings of the lure to kill Tucker, Tate and Rolfe. That very location is incredibly intriguing. If you can see in front of you there, we have Jack Womes' workplace, G&T Commercials, we have the Sorrel Horse pub, and the location of the phone box. Now let's say, for instance, that this wasn't actually Michael Steele making this call, as it's been rumoured, to arrange the meet for later that evening. But this phone call was actually from Jack Womes, to tell Tucker and Tate that Steele was on his way back, the weather had cleared, and they needed to meet down Workhouse Lane later that evening. What also adds a little bit of credibility to this notion is the fact that the phone records show that on the 5th and the 6th of December 1995, there is not one call between Michael Steele and either Tucker, Tate or Rolfe. Is this because Steele has put forward the ruse, the idea that he is abroad sourcing this parcel, they're all going to become rich, he's going to fly this parcel over, just like the West Hanningfield drop, which we will get onto in a little while. So what would be the benefit to Michael Steele creating such a story in order to kill Tucker, Tate and Rolfe? Well, the first thing which springs to my mind is that it almost removes him slightly from the equation. If they believe that he is abroad, it's the element of surprise. You can forget this notion of Steele travelling down there in the Range Rover. That's not backed up by any DNA or scientific proof whatsoever. That is just literally based on the word of Darren Nichols. So let's say, for instance, that Steele isn't in the Range Rover. He's in fact laying in wait down the lane with Jack Womes, and it's the element of surprise there. But more importantly, it's the fact that he has told them he is abroad. And this is something which, I don't know, it's always grated on me in this case. The fact that Michael Steele supposedly said, meet me down the lane, we're going to check out this landing strip. And one thing which has always puzzled me is the fact that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe may well in fact, say to someone, I'm going down to meet Mick Steele. We're going down to look at a landing strip. We're going down, to look at some place where stuff's going to be dropped. I'm going to meet Michael Steele. Surely, if you're going to commit triple murder, this is something that I've said many times in many videos, would you really be that blatant as to arrange the meeting with Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, or Tucker or Tate knowing that someone's going to be driving them, i.e. Craig Rolfe, and that easily one of these three individuals could just say, I'm going to meet Michael Steele? Could it be that Darren Nichols concocted the whole story regarding Michael Steele getting into the Range Rover at the Halfway House pub? We need to remember that Darren Nichols is in fact the only person who admits to being near the scene of the crime at the relevant time. What I find interesting about some of the trial points concerning the defence counsel is the fact that they put forward in court that it wasn't in fact Michael Steele in the Range Rover directing them down Workhouse Lane. It may have in fact have been Darren Nichols. Now, where the waters get muddied a little is the talk of a second vehicle. In the trial points set out by the defence, they state the following in their notes. Raymond Wright, statement, 13th of the 12th, 95, confidential witness. The Range Rover this man observes entering Workhouse Lane at 18:50 hours on the 6th of the 12th, 95, is clearly not the deceased vehicle, as rear lamp guards are a feature of the vehicle he witnesses. What is significant is that three men of large stature occupy the vehicle. The one in the rear offside seat is wearing a fawn light-coloured top, not overalls. We have a photograph of Nichols and Steele together, exhibit SEP13, page 172, where Nichols is wearing such a top. Let's now take a look at that statement from Raymond Alfred Wright, dated the 13th of the 12th, 95, where he states the following. I'm the owner of a Ford Escort Estate motor vehicle, index Lima 127 Oscar Juliet November, colour red. On Wednesday the 6th of the 12th, 95, my wife and myself attended a funeral, and as such we left our young son at my mother's house in Pitsea. The funeral we attended was in Reigate, and I had to drop my wife and mother-in-law off in Hornchurch. After this I carried on to Pitsea, where I picked my son up. The route that I would travel from Pitsea to Tolsunt Darcy includes the A130 from the Sadler's Farm roundabout to the East Hanningfield turnoff. I do not know exactly what time it was that I picked my son up, but I am aware that I arrived home in Tolsunt Darcy about 19:20 to 19:25 hours that evening. As I was travelling along the A130, I went through the Rettendon Turnpike in the direction of Chelmsford when you come through the Rettendon village and into a de-restricted road area. The road then goes into a series of bends on a decline on the road. Because I'm a regular user of the road, I'm aware that on these bends there is situated a farm shop and a gun club on the right hand side of the road, and I'm aware that there could be vehicles waiting to turn right. As I entered this decline, I became aware that the vehicles in front of me had slowed down. This would have been around 250 foot earlier than I would have anticipated stopping. I slowly caught up with the vehicles in front, but I had to brake quite heavily in the end because I hadn't anticipated that any vehicle would be turning into the farm. I then stopped in the line of traffic, and I believe I was either 2 or 3 cars from the front of the line. I believe I was stationary for approximately 10 seconds when an oncoming vehicle left a gap for the vehicle that was turning right to cut across the traffic. As it did, I could see that the vehicle was a 4x4 vehicle, and because of the shape of the rear of the vehicle and the grille over the rear lights, my immediate reaction was that it was a Range Rover. I believed that the vehicle was dark in colour, and I think it was possibly green. I don't know why, but I think there was at least 3 people in the vehicle, and I believe there may have been 4. I was aware there was a driver of the vehicle who was in the dark, and the person who was sitting in the rear of the vehicle behind the driver's seat. This person, who I believe to be a man because of his size, appeared to be bigger than the driver. He was wearing a light fawn-coloured upper garment. As the vehicle started to turn, I got the impression that the person in the back looked over his shoulder in the direction of the Rettendon Turnpike. The vehicle then went into a farm track that I did not know existed. I then continued my journey along the A130, and because I wasn't aware of the farm track, I looked down the track and I could see the rear of the vehicle that had turned into the track. But I do not remember seeing the reflectors of any vehicles in front of it. I then continued my journey home. I believe the time that this incident occurred would have been between 1850 hours and 1900 hours, because it normally takes me around 30 minutes to travel home from there. I don't believe I was more than 2 cars behind the Range Rover, so when it turned I would have been no more than 30 foot from the vehicle. I had a clear and unobstructed view of the vehicle for a period of approximately 2 seconds whilst it crossed in front of me. Although that area of the road is not lit, there was lighting from vehicles coming from the opposite direction. At the time I saw this, the traffic was quite heavy, especially traffic travelling towards Southend. I do wear glasses, but this is not necessary when driving. The man in the fawn-coloured garment in the rear of the vehicle appeared to be sat tight against the window and was even leaning with his right shoulder against the window. Now, one thing I believe is imperative to remember, regardless of which side of the fence you currently sit, in terms of Michael Steele's innocence or guilt, one thing which is imperative to remember is that Darren Nichols wasn't so concerned in terms of securing a conviction against Whomes and Steele. His main concern was always saving his own skin. So the fact that Darren Nichols may well have lied in places, the fact that his statement probably doesn't make much sense in a lot of places, does not necessarily mean that Michael Steele and Jack Whomes are innocent of the crime. Darren Nichols' first port of call always was self-preservation, regardless of what his version of events states. And it's really important that we remember that. It's the case that he has to distance himself from any prior knowledge of these murders. But could it have been Nichols who was in a Range Rover, directing possibly Tucker, Tate and Rolfe or other individuals down Workhouse Lane? That's entirely possible. After all, it is Nichols who actually admits to being in Rettendon on the evening of December the 6th, or at least very close to the crime scene itself. Before we continue on with this video, let's just refresh our memories in terms of what was stated in Donna Jagger's statement. Craig told me that the money had been paid to Mickey Steele, who had taken it to Holland. The weather had changed and there was now snow on the ground. Craig told me this was causing them delay and they were waiting for it to clear. Now, what we know in terms of other witness statements from people close to Tucker, Tate and Rolfe is that there is no doubt that these individuals believed that they were quickly and soon to be coming into money. Now, this is best demonstrated by Pat Tate's relationship with Barry Dorman. He sees his friend, his long-term friend Barry Dorman, the car salesman, on the 6th of December, where there is discussion about a vehicle that Pat Tate is going to buy for Sarah Saunders. There's a falling out between Saunders and Tate, so Tate no longer needs the vehicle. But because he is soon to be stinking rich or coming into certainly a great deal of cash, he decides he's going to buy the vehicle anyway because of the hassle that he's caused his friend Barry Dorman. This is stated in Barry Dorman's own statement from his discussions with Pat Tate on the 6th of December. Tate was coming into money, so he would buy the car anyway. So how did Michael Steele come up with this law? How did he come up with the idea of luring Tucker, Tate and Rolfe down Workhouse Lane with the idea of an incoming plane drop? He has stated to them that he's off to Holland. As far as they are aware, he's in Holland. He's bringing his stuff over in a light aircraft. The last person they expect to see down the lane on the evening of December the 6th is Michael Steele, particularly with his 2 feet firmly on the ground. I believe that the idea could have come from the drop which happened in November 1995, just down the road in West Hanningfield. We will remember the following newspaper article from the 3rd of November 1995 with the title, £500,000 worth of drugs dropped from aircraft. Police believe that bungling drug dealers could have dropped more than £500,000 worth of cannabis in a farmer's pond from an aircraft by mistake. The tightly packed cannabis in black plastic packets was fished from the water in West Hanningfield by Essex police divers. 4 packets had originally been spotted by farmer Jens Haustrup near the edge of the pond. Sergeant Nigel Dermott, who led the diving operation, said, "I have never seen anything like it." The haul is believed to be the biggest of its type in Essex. Police forensic scientists are drying out some of the 53 packets to try to discover its source. The haul weighed more than 300 weight. Detective Chief Inspector Brian Story, head of Chelmsford CID, praised Mr Haustrup for quickly alerting police. He said it was possible that the cannabis had been dropped from an aircraft. Now, what interests me about this story in particular is number one, the close proximity between West Hanningfield and Rettendon, where Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were murdered. Number two, the fact that this newspaper article, this story, came out and hit the press around a month before these three individuals were killed. And thirdly, the fact that Wombs and Steele had almost been caught bringing in the dud cannabis via boat. So what better excuse, what better story to tell Tucker and Tate that the future consignments would be coming in via plane as they had almost been caught. There's evidence that this has worked, this has been done before, or at least someone has tried it before. And what do we find beyond the locked 5-bar gate where Tucker, Tate and Rolfe are found in the Range Rover? What is found beyond the locked 5-bar gate but large fishing ponds? Could this also tie in with the fact that Tucker, Tate and Rolfe were most likely unarmed on the evening of December the 6th? Could it have been that they were simply heading down Workhouse Lane to retrieve a parcel being dropped from a light aircraft being flown simply by Michael Steele? There never was this gang that was supposed to be with Steele. No one was going to be tied up. There was going to be no need for guns to be drawn, for anyone to be tied up and the Charlie to be driven off at high speed in a Range Rover. It was simply a case of heading down to Workhouse Lane, waiting for the parcel to be dropped and collecting it. Or maybe they were even at Workhouse Lane to find a suitable place to drop that parcel. Is that what the call at 2 PM was regarding? Was that from Jack Wombs either saying that Steele was on his way over in the aircraft and to be down Workhouse Lane at a certain time to collect the parcel? Or had he had a call from Steele to say that the weather had now cleared, the flight was going to be imminent, and they needed to find somewhere to drop this parcel? Okay, so we're going to leave part one to this video series here. There's going to be many more parts to come in this particular series. And hopefully this does appeal to a wide range of people who are interested in the Essex Boys case. I know most people either sit on one side of the fence. Either you believe that Michael Steele and Jack Wombs are wholeheartedly guilty or completely innocent of this crime. I think what's going to be interesting about this series in particular is looking at this crime from both perspectives. I've spent probably the last 2 or 3 years looking into this case in terms of their potential innocence. But moving forward, I would like to be able to offer you a more balanced viewpoint. Hopefully that's something that you will appreciate in the future. And as I say, many thanks for joining me for this particular video. Do catch me again for part 2 when we will continue on with my own thoughts and theories concerning the Essex Boys case. If you would like to learn more about the Range Rover murders, then click on the video in front of you now. You will also see the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. Many thanks for joining me for this video. I look forward to seeing you all again for the next one. Take care. Cheers.